You are listening to TBR Radio Presents The DIXIE Heritage Show, with your host, the Director of DIXIE Heritage, Dr. Ed DeVries.
Our guest today is Jim Gregg, and Jim is an 82-year-old compatriot from East Texas. For a number of years, he has been a subscriber to TBR Magazine, the Barnes Review, and he had reached out to the Barnes Review and asked that I give him a call because he and I have great-grandfathers that probably knew each other during the course of the war between the states because they both served together in the 19th Texas Infantry. And Jim knew that I had written a book, or rather had co-authored a book with the late Colonel Gary Canada, which is a regimental history of the 19th Texas Infantry. And so Jim wanted to talk to me, and so I gave him a phone call, and we were talking about our ancestors. And somehow or another, that conversation took an interesting turn, and the next thing you know, we're talking about the Kennedy assassination. Just so happened that Jim was there that day, the day of the Kennedy assassination. And he was also working a security detail the day before for Adlai Stevenson. And so he just started telling me some stories and shedding some insight and some light on things that you'd never heard before. What you're going to notice here is that the conversation is a little disconnected. So you're going to have to listen to the whole broadcast today to get it all. But what's going to happen is we're going to talk a little bit about ancestors, and then we're going to talk a little bit about the Kennedy assassination. Then we're going to talk a little bit about Adlai Stevenson. Then we're going to go back to the Kennedy assassination. So don't think that you've heard it all. You just have to listen to the whole thing to get it. But it'll be well worth the next half an hour that you're going to spend.
My great-grandfather was in the Company D, 19th Texas Infantry. You had edited a book on the 19th Texas Infantry. A guy by the name of Canada, I believe, wrote. Was your great-grandfather a sergeant in the 19th Texas Infantry?
Yes, sir, he was.
Do you know which company?
It was Company C. Or what was your ancestor's name?
McClung. M-C-C-L-U-G. He was shot in the chest at Jenkins Ferry, and then my great uncle, is buried in the Little Rock Memorial Cemetery there. He died during the war, but they were up there with keeping banks out of Texas.
So
they were Pleasant Hill, Mansfield, went over to west side of Vicksburg of the Mississippi River.
Well, let's start by my asking you specifically about your great-grandfather.
Joseph Wilson McClung was my great-grandfather. He was General Waterhouse, I believe, Texans, Civil War 19 Texas Infantry, Walker's Division, Trans-Mississippi, Company D, J.W. McClung, L.J. McClung, and W.J. McClung.
Yes, sir. There's three of them. There's J.W. McClung, L.J. McClung, and W.J. McClung. I've got three McClungs here.
Exactly. That one of them's my great-grandfather, and the other my great-two or my great-uncle.
Okay.
Now, one of those companies, I think later on, was diverted and signed for security at Jefferson, Texas. Paul's asked me to write an article about it, and because he didn't even know it, which, a lot of people don't know it. But if you Google 1860, Henderson Fire, F-I-R-E, large plaque put up downtown here that by the Texas Historical Commission. And according to that plaque, right here in Henderson, the 1860 Henderson Fire, which you can read on the plaque, was a precipitating factor for Texas to succeed from the Union. Louis Wigfall is mentioned, of course. That he must have been a heck of a guy. I'm not sure he wasn't underappreciated in the Confederacy. His wife made the Lonestar flag from her wedding dress, and of course thereafter the Lonestar flag, as you probably well know, in its present form, is a Confederate battle flag.
I'll say don't let that get out too much, or they'll want to do what they did to Mississippi's flag.
Exactly. Well, it's already getting out, but I have to tell you, before I'm dead and gone, I would like to see if anybody will take a stand and fight for anything. if they won't fight to defend the Lone Star flag, well, I guess I need to cash in anyway. That'd be the ultimate trophy for the heritage thieves. I read your bio. I told my wife about it, and we both wondered how in the world do you have time to do everything? You have a church, and of course, do you still do chaplaincy activities? College? You've had some major accomplishments. I have to compliment you. Let me say it this way, Doctor. I'm glad you're on our side.
Open your web browser and type in www.barnesreview.org and discover the Barnes Review magazine. In the Barnes Review, you will read vignettes of man, from the prehistoric to the very recent, from forgotten races and civilizations to first-person accounts of World War II and the late Cold War. There is no more interesting magazine published today, nor a more significant and important subject than real history. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review. You can subscribe to receive the Barnes Review magazine in its print form, or in convenient electronic delivery. Our host has been a subscriber to both formats for years. So visit www.barnesreview.org and subscribe to the Barnes Review.
I just received my copy of a TBR, the latest one.
So then it had the articles about Lee and Stewart, and the article that I wrote on the 7 Days campaign?
Yes, sir. And Jeb Stewart. Of course, at the Gettysburg thing, they tried to, anyway, about all the intelligence gathering he was doing for Lee. History is so intriguing, and especially when the genealogy and you learn about your ancestors. My McClung, that was my dad's mother's name, but on my side of Gray, Gray, well, it was in the 37th Georgia Infantry.
So tell me about him. Tell me everything you know about him.
Was taken prisoner and put at Lake Erie up there in a Yankee camp. But hold on a minute, please, sir.
I said, why don't you take a moment and just tell me about each of your ancestors in whatever order is easier for you to do that. Just tell me about all of them.
I was able to go back to 1620, and then from there, it would be, go European, Ireland.
And so where did your people originally settle then when they came from Ireland?
Georgia.
Okay.
And then McClung came from Georgia on to East Texas. And that's how he wound up in the 19th Texas.
So my great-grandfather came from Alabama, and that's how he wound up in the 19th Texas Infantry. Actually, he had come to Texas from Alabama because he wanted to look at some land, and the war broke out, and the secession happened while he was in Texas, and so he joined the Army, and then, went back to his family in Alabama 4 years later, realized that, pretty much his farm and everything was lost and destroyed, and his family was living at the charity of others, and he's like, well, I bought that land in Texas, let's move. And so he and his wife and their 8 kids literally walked from Alabama to Texas, right outside of Comanche.
Oh, man, that's out west.
Yep.
Yeah, that's out west Texas. He had a long walk.
But tell me about your ancestors. Just tell me about them.
William James Gray was my great-grandfather, born January 2nd, 1832. He was a farmer by occupation and a veteran of the Civil War, serving as a private, first enlisting in the 9th Battalion, Company D, of the Georgia Volunteer Infantry, which is Army of Tennessee, here it says. Later, he transferred 37th Georgia Regiment Infantry, Company G, which was nicknamed the Elbert, E-L-B-E-R-T, Elbert County Guard. And they moved the 1870s to Franklin County, Georgia. He passed away in 1879. By the way, my granddaddy McClung was wounded shot in the chest at Jenkins Ferry, and my great-grandmother and the kids took a wagon up there, and they got him and brought him back to northeast Texas, and he lived and was able to, recover and somewhat take care of his farm. I thought that's kind of interesting, bring him back in a wagon.
So did you just have the James Gray that you'd mentioned, your great-grandfather, Are you named for him?
Yes, and I went into the SCV under his name on the lineage, presented credentials to get into the SCV. I could have under McClung and all, but then I had another one that was one of the McClung was an ensign in the Confederate Navy. Gosh, I'm so many of them. Hard to keep everybody straight. I'm not a young man anymore. I'll be 82 first part of December, but I'm hanging on.
So how many years have you subscribed to the Barnes Review?
Oh, gosh. I don't remember. Sometime, and then, of course, Vince was at the Spotlight. Do you remember the Spotlight?
Yes, sir.
American Free Press came after that.
Yes, sir.
And then back in the 60s, I would have conversations periodically with Dr. Edward Fields, called a Thunderbolt. And later on, that became The Truth at Last. Oh, he had a lot of different kinds of brochures, a lot of information you wouldn't get anywhere else.
The interview kind of takes an interesting turn here. I'm not exactly for sure how this came up in the conversation, but come to find out that our guest was actually in Dallas on the day that President Kennedy was assassinated. He was actually part of the security detail. He was one of the top law enforcement people in the state of Texas at the time. He was actually the chief deputy of Gregg County, Texas at the time. And so the conversation just takes an interesting turn here. What I'm going to do is we're going to cut for a commercial from the American Free Press, but stay tuned because you're about to hear a first-hand account of the Kennedy assassination.
Extra, read all about it.
If you're like me, and I'll bet you are, you like to be on the cutting edge of honest news and accurate information. You like to hear about the latest financial trends and to know what's happening around the world and right here in the United States. The things that can directly impact you, your life, and the life of your family. And if you're like me, you do not rely on the mainstream media to obtain this information because, frankly, you know that you just can't trust them. Fortunately, there is an alternative news outlet with a long-established track record for honesty and integrity, and that is the American Free Press. 26 times a year, the American Free Press newspaper can be delivered to your door, packed with the kind of uncensored news that I know you're going to appreciate. AFP publishes exciting, in-depth, uncensored news and information that's grassroots and patriotic, information that Americans need to know in order to combat the growing police state. AFP stands firmly against the New World Order and against those who are working to establish a global plantation under the rule of a powerful few. In short, AFP is your voice. If you have any doubt why they want to silence AFP, you must be relying on the lamestream media for your news, and folks, that's a big mistake. If you're ever dissatisfied with your subscription to the American Free Press, their guarantee is that you just drop them an email and they will gladly refund the unused portion of your subscription. So what are you waiting for? Visit www.americanfreepress.net. Once again, www.americanfreepress.net. And find out about the American Free Press. Do it today.
Extra, read all about it.
And then I was in Dallas. I worked in Dallas. I was in Dallas. And when Kennedy was shot, I was at the motorcade. Happened to know some things that went on there. Observed it. I mean, I was I watched them come through.
So what did you see then? You said that there were some things that you had observed. What did you see?
Well, there were 4 shots, definite shots, instead of 3. See, I wound up, and I also had a still carry a full commission in law enforcement. I qualified and take my courses, and I was chief deputy in Gregg County, Longview, Texas. But I had a lot of police acquaintances in Dallas, and Jacob Rubenstein, better known as Jack Ruby, I'm kind of getting off a little bit, but he and Oswald and Tippett all knew each other, and they would sit around the table in Carousel Club downtown Dallas. But my mind, looking back, what at the time, it wasn't any question, it was a conspiracy. Yeah, I was quite active. I was younger then, of course, an activist. At the time, I was a chapter leader in the John Birch Society, and had been a veteran and was still involved in some veterans activities. And General Walker, you ever heard of General Edwin Walker?
Yes, sir.
And I knew him, and he had a rally the night before in the Memorial Auditorium there in Dallas, and was packed out. He told us all to come back the next night, which the next night was United Nations night, and Adlai Stevenson was there, and that's the night was there that he got hit. We had a riot, probably 3,000 or 4,000 people in a riot, and because our Birch Society, we were there protesting, picketing, and then Stanley Marcus of the Neiman Marcus fame was introducing Adlai, and the people started yelling and carrying on and protesting, so they escorted him out the side of the stage. Well, I happened to be in a position, and you get a kick out of this. I didn't know it on Dallas TV, and I was carrying the St. Andrew's Cross flag inside that Memorial Auditorium, and that kind of precipitated some things. Some people said, you can't come in here with this flag, That might have helped, I don't know.
And that was in the
back,
1960s?
Though, it was an exciting time. Yes, sir. I believe, about 1963, I think. I think, somewhere in there.
And you were told in Texas...
Stanley Marcus.
So you were told in Texas in 1963... You were told in Texas in 1963 that you could not display a Confederate flag. Exactly.
In the Memorial Auditorium in Dallas, Texas. And of course, I refused, and I actually had a number of vets. I was going to some veterans activities, and we decided we'd all go hear we would go hear General Walker, which we did, and of course, we said, the next night, we'd just come back to the UN night because General Walker told us all to be there. And of course, we had a very, very big crowd of people that were there Friday night, came the next night. Old Stanley Marcus. It was, I thought I was in a foreign country. I never saw so many foreign-looking people in my life. I remember that impression. It's kind of interesting. I was up in the walkway there in this huge auditorium, and I'm looking at my mind's eye, the balconies and all. The place was packed. And if you've been in crowds, I know when, for some reason, there's all the chatter, and there's a phenomenon, I guess I'd call it, when there's a silent few seconds that things get quiet. Have you ever experienced that?
Yes, sir.
And I was up there with that flag, I think, before I had the encounter. And now remember, I was just a young man then, Doctor. Anyway, that little moment of silence, I was up in the running walkway up there, and I cupped my hands, and when they escorted him out the side of the auditorium door there, outside to his limousine, I cupped my hands, and I said, "There he goes, get him." And that place emptied out. Well, I immediately ran down to the lobby, the foyer, I ran outside, and the time I got out there, he was already in the limousine, but some of us had our hands up on the window there, and his eyes were big as saucers. Of course, then here come the fire trucks and fire hoses and the police and whatever. Like I said, I was kind of full of oats then. And Dallas at the time was very ultra-conservative. A guy named Bruce Alger was a congressman. I might resurrect a poster if you've ever seen it. I have to kind of be careful about all this. There was some leaflets, hundreds of them, spread out all over Dallas the night before the assassination. It was a full face and a profile of JFK, and in big letters it said, "Wanted for treason." And it listed some things down there as to why, like Bay of Pigs and things like that. And you could probably find that on the internet. But I still, for some reason, I still may have a copy or two of the original leaflets. They were pastel. They were very inexpensive paper. They were yellow, white, blue, pink, that kind of thing. And, of course, then the Warren Commission, and the fellow that had printed them off, he made a mistake. He had his thumbprint that they picked up on the plate where they ran the leaflets. I don't know, maybe we're a little ahead of it. We had our own little operation, I guess you'd say, kind of like what today's Antifa, but we were very pro-American, pro-Southern.
Welcome to the Christendom curriculum. Every parent who decides to homeschool wants to secure a great education for their child, while also saving time and money. But these days, many parents have another concern. They also want a homeschool curriculum without all the multiculturalist, politically correct diversity doctrine that's really little more than a thin disguise for an anti-Christian, anti-American, and anti-Western civilization bias. Now there is such a curriculum. The Christendom curriculum gives your children a complete education in Bible, history, literature, and more, focusing on the classic academic skills of reading, writing, and arithmetic. But we also tell the story of Christendom, the story of the Christian nations, especially as Christ's kingdom has been historically manifest in the nations of Europe and America, and we do so without apology. The Christendom curriculum is the only Christian nationalist homeschool program you'll find. We support the right of the European and American peoples to their historic Christian cultures against the globalist leftists who want to destroy those cultures. Not only that, but we provide assigned reading courses for various hot-button subjects in our current culture wars, including feminism, social justice, and cultural Marxism, among others. These reading courses will teach your kids how to survive a social justice warrior attack, how to debate with leftists on social media, how to reform their local churches and communities, and more. We're living in a time of tremendous historical and social change. Christians have the opportunity now to begin building the culture and civilization of the next 1,000 years and beyond. It's an exciting time to be alive. So if you want to help raise the next generation of culture warriors, if you want your children to grow up with a love for Christ's kingdom and for their own nation, while at the same time learning how to defend America and rebuild the West, the easy-to-use Christendom curriculum is for you. Click the Learn More button to get in on the action. And thanks for listening.
So do you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald even fired a shot that day, or do you believe he fired one of several shots? Or, I mean, what do you, and I know that you probably can't, speak with total authority on this subject, but just based on your observations, what do you think happened that day?
I think he was set up to be a patsy, and that now this is what I had heard back at the time from some of the police, that Tippit and Ruby were engaged in a relationship, nefarious type relationship.
Like a criminal relationship or a homosexual relationship?
Homosexual.
Okay.
And that they were going to have Officer Tippit was going to take Oswald out to silence him, which allegedly he took Tippit out. I don't know how much you could remember, in the police car there in West Dallas, and then he ran to the Texas Theater, and that's where they captured Oswald.
Hello, I'm Tom Strain, Lieutenant Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. The Confederate flag, Confederate symbols, and the reputation of our Confederate ancestors has come under attack. The Sons of Confederate Veterans is actively fending off our detractors, but there is only so much that we can do. We need your help. Contact your local, state, and national elected politicians and tell them that you will not tolerate these attacks on our heritage. You can also visit scv.org, download an application to join us in our fight to preserve our Southern heritage. Visit scv.org today. If you don't have a Confederate ancestor and you are tired of American history disappearing, you can assist us by becoming a friend of the SCV. Please visit scvheritagedefense.org and make a donation to the Heritage Defense Fund. We hope that you will join us in the fight to defend the Confederate soldiers' good name.
Remember when we were kids and every Friday we would watch the Dukes of Hazzard on TV, and Bo and Luke Duke would be driving the General Lee, and they would jump up that ramp and they'd be going and they'd be about halfway across that river or whatever it was they were jumping, and then they'd cut to a commercial and we'd have to spend the next couple of minutes wondering whether or not they made it over the river. Well, I guess we're just going to have to spend the next week finding out if our guest Jim Gray is going to make it over the river. I know this, he just jumped the car, so to speak, because you talk about a bombshell revelation. You just heard before the commercial that Jack Ruby and the officer who arrested him were engaged in a homosexual relationship before the whole Kennedy assassination and all of this even had happened. I mean, it's probably going to take you a week to wrap your brain around that anyways. And so we're going to cut the broadcast right here. Tune in again next week, same time, same place. And you'll hear the rest of this exciting story told to us by our guest today, Jim Gray, who was the chief deputy of Gregg County, Texas, and who was there on the day of the Kennedy assassination. He was there when the president got off the plane, saw the motorcade begin. He was there when the shots were fired. He was there the whole time. He's going to tell us even more stuff about the Kennedy assassination. Things that in all of my study, I had never heard before. Just little details. And you'll want to tune in next week. Trust me. Same bat time, same bat channel. In the meantime, what you want to do is you want to go to my website, www.dixiheritage.net. www.dixiheritage.net. Go to the bookstore. Go to the store link at dixiheritage.net. And I sell there on that website the regimental history of the 19th Texas Infantry that it was co-authored by myself and Colonel Gary Canada. And so that was what started our conversation today. And so you'll want to read that regimental history, and you'll find out all about my great-grandfather and all about our guest, Jim Gray's great-grandfather and his great-uncles as well, and the battles and the campaigns in which they engaged. So check that out, History of the 19th Texas Infantry. You can also order a copy in hardback, paperback, or Kindle ebook at Amazon. But until then, go to my website, www.dixiheritage.net. Another thing that you'll be able to do at dixiheritage.net, you'll be able to sign up for my free email newsletter. And when you do, I will send you absolutely free of charge, no cost or obligation, a PDF copy of my best-selling book, The Truth About the Confederate Battle Flag. So go to dixiheritage.net and check all that great stuff out. Do that today. Also go to the Barnes Review website, www.barnesreview.org, and find out about this great September-October issue of the Barnes Review, Defending American Heroes. I've got an article in there on Jeb Stuart. It's a multi-page spread. I also have an article in there on the Battle of 7 Days and why I believe that was the missed opportunity where the Confederacy could have won the war during the 7 Days campaign. And I explain how and why. Paul Angel had a great article in that issue on Robert E. Lee, and there's just a lot of other great articles in there on Thomas Jefferson, on Father Juniper Serra, and on Charles Lindbergh, on just Christopher Columbus. Pat Buchanan had a great article on Christopher Columbus. All of our American heroes whose statues are being taken down today, we are defending their honor and integrity in this September-October issue of the Barnes Review magazine, Defending American Heroes. So go to barnesreview.org, get a copy of that. Go to dixiheritage.net, get a copy of my book, Regimental History of the 19th Texas Infantry. If you're listening on YouTube this week, click like and subscribe. That really helps our channel. Make sure you tune in next week, same time, same place, so that you can listen to Jim Gray's continuation of what was happening on the day of the Kennedy assassination. You don't want to miss it. So until then, from all of us here at TBR Radio, God bless.